The Acolyte season finale saw the introduction of Darth Plagueis into live action. But it also brings with it a ton of questions like why is he in that cave and what's his connection to Qimir?
What do you want?
The power of two.
It's time to put on your creepy cave attire and grab your lightsabers as we deep dive on the Sith in The Acolyte.
Jedi like you might call me Sith.
Before we jump in, remember to leave a thumbs up on the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to catch more of our Star Wars videos. Now, without further ado, let's get into the mystery of Darth Plagueis in The Acolyte. With The Acolyte being set around 100 years before the prequel trilogy, we knew the show was taking us into Darth Tenebrous and Darth Plagueis territory. However, up until the season finale, the only dark side Force user we saw that wielded a red lightsaber was Qimir, who for the most of the season had his Sith status pulled into question by fans, with some even suggesting, which is a pretty decent theory to be fair, that he was the first Knight of Ren as opposed to being a Dark Lord of the Sith. However, that's since been debunked by showrunner Leslie Headland, and from what we've seen from Qimir this season, I think it's a safe bet to say he is a Sith, and he wants the power of two, which is actually another way of saying the rule of two, a long-standing Sith tradition where you have the master with the power and the apprentice that's craving it. Now, he thought he found this with May, however she was only really in it for revenge, nothing greater. However, in a dramatic turn of events, he actually ends up taking on her twin sister Osha instead. Qimir needed his Acolyte to be able to kill a Jedi without a weapon. Now, we don't know yet if this itself, like the rule of two, is also a Sith tradition or something Qimir's came up with himself. However, we do know Osha, unlike her sister, achieved this by killing Master Soul, showcasing what is likely the first time the Force choke technique had been used. But what's more, she took things one step further, although clearly unintentionally, by bleeding her former master's Kyber crystal, turning it from blue to red, which happens when a dark side Force user channels their darkest emotions into it. And this might actually account for the blank expression on her face if the sabers were all the anger and pain is going. This is also a Sith tradition, so she's achieved the two in one there. Now, the season concluded with the Sith's continued survival in the shadows remaining unknown to the Jedi. Every single Jedi that encountered Qimir ended up dead. Now, Venestra, on the other hand, we learn knows him, and he actually used to be her apprentice before he turned to the dark side, but it doesn't seem like she knows he's a Sith. Besides, she actually seems to be hiding his involvement in the conflict. She's aware he's involved, but she's keeping it a secret from the rest of the Order, likely because, just like Master Soul, she has her own demons to hide. Now, in the midst of the action of Episode 8, we had the reveal of all reveals, Darth Plagueis, a character many fans have been waiting to cross over into live action for a long time. However, the question's been raised if his arrival in the Acolyte contradicts the Plagueis stories that came before. Now, it's important to remember that much of what we knew about Darth Plagueis comes from Star Wars Legends now, which isn't considered canon outside of the Acolyte, and don't worry, we'll come onto his involvement here in a moment, but all of that exists in canon of Plagueis before this show is what Palpatine told Anakin about him in Revenge of the Sith.
You ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
And a few lines from Palpatine reminiscing on his old master in James Luceno's Tarkin novel, which didn't reveal all that much. It's also worth bearing in mind that George Lucas himself considered Legends to be stories from an alternate universe, rather than his own, which included the first 6 movies and the Clone Wars. However, with that being said, even taking Legends into account, Plagueis' appearance here makes sense. One of the biggest questions was around his age, with many believing he'd be too young to be a Sith Lord if he was even born at this time at all. However, going back to the Darth Plagueis novel within Legends, it's revealed that Plagueis could quite easily have become Darth Tenebrous' apprentice as much as 20 years prior to the Acolyte. Legends timelines are blurry to say the least, but it reveals that not only does Plagueis' appearance not break canon, it actually aligns with the expanded universe too. Now, the reason he appears in the show, on the other hand, is far more mysterious. Through Qimir, we're introduced to an unknown planet which matches up pretty well with one that, like much of Plagueis' story, resides in Star Wars Legends. That planet would be Baldemnig, and this is where the threads between canon and Legends begin to connect. You see, Plagueis' master Darth Tenebrous was big on cortosis, which is the metal used for Qimir's helmet. He believed it was essential in eventually defeating a Jedi. Cortosis was present on Baldemnig. Now, Plagueis and Tenebrous mined it there together. It's worth noting in Legends, these events play out after the time of the Acolyte. However, as they aren't canon, they're open to being changed. Now, Baldemnig, which I think is the planet where Qimir's island is located, is also the place where Plagueis eventually slayed his master, ascending to the rank of master himself. Now, we're not sure if this has happened by the time of the show just yet. However, it'd be pretty cool if The Acolyte took place whilst this was happening, because they're both mining cortosis while Qimir had Osha on the island, and Plagueis' cave appearance took place just moments after he killed Tenebrous. However, I doubt they'd do that, as there's way too much of a cool story there for them to just brush over, and besides, I think Qimir would be aware of mining activity that close to where he lived. I think it's much more likely that Plagueis was there for Qimir, and perhaps even Osha too. Now, Qimir turned out to be one of the biggest mysteries of the season, and if we're to understand Plagueis' involvement in all of this, then we need to have an idea on Qimir's first. Of course, it was revealed he was May's master and likely a Sith. Now, of course, it is possible he is just a former Jedi that turned dark.
You speak as if you were a Jedi.
I was.
And learnt the way of the Sith from ancient artifacts. However, he's extremely powerful. It seems he's received some kind of dark side training since leaving the Order. Besides, he knew of the power of two, which he wouldn't have discovered from Sith artifacts of old, as this rule was only established after the Sith War by Darth Bane. So for the most part, Qimir seems to be the real deal here. In the era of the Acolyte within Legends, there are only two Sith Lords known to be active, Tenebrous and Plagueis, as mentioned earlier on, and Palpatine didn't come into the picture until a little bit later. Now, we've already seen Plagueis. The one we haven't seen is Tenebrous, or have we? A reliable scooper which first came to my attention during the Ahsoka show had actually revealed that all the way up until the last minute pretty much, that Qimir was Darth Tenebrous, with recorded dialogue even confirming as much. It was said to be the last shot of the show. Now, we've heard since the finale that Plagueis' shot was initially the last shot of the season before they swapped it out with Yoda. And I think this likely contributed to the dialogue being cut too, as they didn't want a Tenebrous reveal to happen that early on. Now, come to think of it, I wouldn't be surprised if the recorded dialogue calling Qimir Tenebrous was actually from Plagueis himself. But what this also means is that they've changed the Sith laws that are of the Biff species within canon, probably because the Biff are a little too well known from performing in the Cantina band. Now, going forwards, they probably want them to be a little bit more menacing to the average viewer. Now, as I mentioned, it does look like this is being cut out at the last minute, but remember the whole species change idea for later. Now, I think it's possible they cut this because they're wanting to save the Tenebrous reveal for season 2, but of course, there's the chance they've scrapped the idea completely. But when you think back through the first season with Qimir being Tenebrous in mind, it does make a lot of sense that that's the direction they were taking it in. They could have played it off as an essence transfer, or even just a straight up species change for live action. However, Tenebrous was known to train another apprentice, Darth Venomous. He didn't strictly adhere to the rule of two, and this all happened behind Plagueis' back. He actually wanted an apprentice to replace Plagueis. So if this is what we see him doing with May and now Osha, then Plagueis is there in secret observing his own master attempting to replace him. Now, there's also a chance they scrap the whole Tenebrous idea in favour of actually making Qimir the other apprentice, Venomous, and this has been floating around in the fan theory space for a long time now. So hats off to you if you were one of the originals on this one, but remember Venomous in Legends was also a Biff. So if they're moving away from that race with Tenebrous, then it would make sense for them to do the same thing with Venomous. But another interesting tidbit about Venomous here is that he could levitate. He could use the Force to pretty much fly. Now, we've already seen Qimir float down from the trees behind Osha in episode 5, and in episode 8 he somehow managed to get into the fortress without using a lift or climbing up the side of it. So there's a similarity there, and Sith Lords with the ability to fly, as you know, aren't that common. Anyways, because Tenebrous already had an official apprentice in Plagueis, Venomous wasn't officially given the title of Sith. He kind of just called himself one. Now, this could explain why Qimir told Sol that he had no name and stopped short of calling himself a Sith, instead just saying that's what the Jedi might refer to him as. This would also make sense as to why Qimir seems to follow the Bane line of Sith, one in the rule of two, as he was taught in secret by one. So I think there's a good chance we could be seeing Venomous looking for his own apprentice with the eye and taking down Tenebrous and becoming a Sith Master himself, likely before he sets sights on cleaning up the mess that Tenebrous left behind with Plagueis. Now, as for our favourite Mune, and he is our favourite, right, we know in Legends he becomes aware of Venomous himself and ends up conducting a whole load of experiments and tests on him. So perhaps this is beginning to take place in the Acolyte now. Perhaps we saw Plagueis stalking out Venomous. Given the big reveals of the show, the twins being created through the use of the Force and then being a possible Force dyad, it's clear Qimir, if he isn't already, in the near future, will become directly connected to Plagueis in some way, enough to pass on what he's learned about the Brendok witches and the twins to him. I think there's a good chance he's either a canon version of Darth Venomous or a yet to be revealed apprentice of Plagueis, perhaps the one before Palpatine. After all, it was revealed in Revenge of the Sith that Plagueis could keep the ones he cared about from dying, and Qimir did tell Osha he trained as a Jedi a very long time ago. And for me, it seems the show laid the foundations for the events that will one day push the Force to creating the Chosen One, Anakin Skywalker. All of that happened when it did because Plagueis was trying to influence the midichlorians to create life himself. a technique I think he likely became aware of from the Witches of Brendok, either directly or indirectly. This seems all the more likely to be the case when we consider Plagueis also tried to create a Force dyad between himself and Palpatine, something the twins are also hinted to be. I think the show is way too important to the lore of Star Wars to not be given the green light for a season 2, so hopefully we'll have more revealed to us there. We know the conflict isn't over yet, as Venestra's now looking for a fallen Padawan Qimir, who she's now discovered is still alive, and she's going to be accompanied by May. Of course, more heat coming onto Qimir also brings more heat onto Plagueis, lurking just off screen in the shadows. So what do you think Plagueis is up to in The Acolyte? As always, drop your thoughts, theories and wilder speculations down in the comments below. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up on the video if you enjoyed it, and of course subscribe to the channel if you'd like to catch more of a Star Wars coverage. I'll see you in the next one. May the Force be with you.